Imagine this. You are standing in the absolute center of the green hell, the Amazon rainforest. Around you, the air is so thick with humidity, it feels like you are breathing underwater. No food, no map, no shelter. Your friends left 3 days ago. At first, you told yourself they were just looking for help. But now, in the deafening silence of the jungle, the truth hits you like a physical blow. They are not coming back. The Amazon is not just a forest. It is a breathing, hungry, ancient monster that has no mercy for your survival. It was here millions of years before you arrived, and it will remain here, indifferent and cold, long after your bones have turned to dust and been washed away by the tropical rain. In this deep dive documentary, we explore the most devastating and psychologically shattering survival story of the 20th century, the ordeal of Yossi Ginsberg, a 22-year-old dreamer who was betrayed by his companions, hunted by a relentless apex predator, and forced to watch his own flesh rot while he was still conscious. From the moment of a fatal raft explosion on the Tuichi River to the supernatural miracle of the 21st day, this is the definitive account of how one man defied the laws of nature. Now, look at your hands. What would you do to keep them from trembling if you were in his shoes? Stay with us, because the jungle is just getting started.
It all began with a toxic thirst for adventure and the glittering promise of gold. The year was 1981. Yossi Ginsberg was young, restless, and possessed by a wanderlust that couldn't be satisfied by tourist maps. He wanted the real Amazon. In the shadows of a dusty bar in La Paz, Bolivia, fate threw him into the path of Karl Ruprechter. Karl was the personification of a Hollywood adventurer, charismatic, mysterious, and claiming to be a high-stakes geologist. Karl whispered stories that would intoxicate any young mind, tales of uncontacted tribes living in Stone Age isolation, hidden valleys of untouched vistas, and the ultimate prize, lost gold buried deep within the Amazonian basin. Yossi was instantly hooked. He didn't see the red flags. He didn't see the darkness in Karl's eyes. Along with two new friends, Kevin, an ambitious American photographer, and Marcus, a gentle Swiss teacher, they ignored every warning from the local villagers. They bought basic supplies and stepped into the Tuichi River with a dangerous level of arrogance. They viewed the jungle as a playground, a backdrop for their personal glory. They didn't realize that Karl's expertise was a facade. Almost immediately, the green hell began to test them. The humidity rotted their morale. Arguments over rations, pace, and leadership turned friends into strangers. The group began to fracture. The psychological weight of the Amazon was winning the war before the first drop of blood was even spilled on the forest floor. The internal tension finally reached a violent breaking point. The group made a decision that would haunt them forever. They split in two. Karl and Marcus, exhausted and fearful, decided to turn back and attempt to walk through the dense, unforgiving brush of the upper mountains. They were never seen again. Their fate remains one of the Amazon's great, dark mysteries. Yossi and Kevin, fueled by a mix of desperation and bravado, chose the water. They constructed a primitive wooden raft tied together with vines and hope, believing the river would provide a swift, easy passage back to civilization. It was a fatal miscalculation. The Tuichi River is not a gentle stream. It is a chaotic, raging, whitewater monster. As they entered the treacherous San Pedro Canyon, the sound of the water changed from a hum to a deafening roar. The rapids became a nightmare of foam and jagged rocks. Suddenly, the raft hit a massive boulder. The wood shattered like thin glass. In the chaos, Kevin managed to grab a jagged branch and pull himself onto the shore, gasping for air. But Yossi. Yossi was swept away by the brutal, unrelenting current. He was dragged over massive waterfalls, his body slammed against ancient stones, his lungs burning and screaming for oxygen as he was held underwater by the weight of the river. When he finally washed up, broken and shivering on a muddy bank, he was miles away from Kevin. He was alive, but he was stripped bare. No knife, no fire, no shoes, no hope. The 21-day countdown to the grave had officially begun, and the jungle was closing in.
The Amazon at night is not a place of rest. It is a primal symphony of terror. For Yossi, the darkness was a physical weight, pressing against his chest. He spent those first nights perched on high, unstable branches, shivering uncontrollably, listening to the rhythmic hisses and the guttural roars of predators he could feel but never see. By the sixth night, the psychological strain reached its peak. He felt a pair of cold, calculating eyes anchored on him from the brush. Two glowing yellow orbs emerged from the shadows. It was a jaguar. The apex predator of the basin was not just passing by, it was stalking him, circling his position with a terrifying, silent grace. Yossi was utterly weaponless. In that moment of pure, crystalline desperation, he remembered a primitive survival trick: move, scream, and become a threat. But the jaguar was unimpressed. It was hungry. As the massive cat tensed its muscles for the final lunge, Yossi fumbled in his pocket and found a small can of insect repellent. In a frantic last-ditch effort, he sprayed the chemical mist and struck his lighter. A sudden, violent burst of flame hit the jaguar's face. The beast let out a confused snarl and retreated into the black void of the jungle. Yossi had won the battle, but as he sat trembling in the dark for the rest of the night, a new, more terrifying truth settled in. He was no longer a traveler on an adventure. He was prey at the absolute bottom of the food chain, and the jungle had just sent its first warning.
By the beginning of the second week, the sky stayed a bruised, permanent gray. The rain became his greatest enemy. It was constant, heavy, and soul-crushing, turning the forest floor into a swamp of decay. Yossi's boots were perpetually filled with a mixture of stagnant water and mud, but he was paralyzed by the fear of taking them off. When he finally found a dry log and pulled the leather away, he screamed in agony. His skin had become so waterlogged that it had lost all structural integrity. It didn't just blister. It began to peel away in thick, white layers like wet paper. The flesh underneath was raw, pulp-like, and rotting while he was still standing on it. Every single step felt like walking on red-hot shards of glass. To keep his legs moving, he had to tear pieces from his only shirt, wrapping the bloody stumps of his feet and soaking them in cold mud just to numb the excruciating burning sensation. He was starving. His body was cannibalizing its own muscle mass. He scavenged for raw eggs and bird nests, ate bitter fruits that burned his throat, and at his lowest point, he even contemplated the unthinkable, eating his own decaying skin to stay alive. But then, the mental fortress finally crumbled. The isolation birthed a hallucination. He began talking to a young girl who was not there. She became his shadow, his silent companion, his only reason to stay awake during the long, rainy nights. He was losing his mind, drifting between two worlds. But the fire of his spirit refused to let the green hell claim him just yet.
Day 21. The end of the line. Yossi was no longer a man. He was a skeleton draped in translucent skin. He lay motionless on a muddy riverbank, his eyes staring blankly at the canopy above, unable to even lift his head to swat away the flies. He had accepted the inevitable. He had made peace with death. But miles away, in a display of loyalty that defies logic, his friend Kevin had never given up.
Against all advice from the authorities, Kevin had convinced a local guide named Tico to take a small wooden boat back into the treacherous heart of the San Pedro Canyon. They weren't looking for a survivor, they were looking for a body to bring home for burial. As their boat rounded a final sharp bend in the river, Kevin's eyes caught a strange speck of blue on the distant shore. He thought it was a tropical bird. Then the speck moved. Against every law of biology, Yossi had used his final ounce of adrenaline to stand up and wave his tattered blue shirt. When the boat reached the bank, Yossi fell into Kevin's arms, weeping silently, his body shaking with a trauma that would take a lifetime to heal. He had lost 30 pounds. His feet were unrecognizable masses of infection, but he was alive. Yossi Ginsberg survived the green hell because he refused to surrender his will to the darkness. Marcus and Karl, however, were never found. They became a permanent part of the Amazon silence. This story remains the ultimate testament to the human will. No matter how deep the jungle, the fire inside you can always find a way back to the light. If you found this story of resilience incredible, don't forget to like and subscribe as we continue to explore the world's most impossible survival stories. Thank you for watching.